Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Joy of Being the Real You podcast. I myself, my host is Joy Yamamoto, and my creative director is Eunice Medirano. And we are excited to tell you about our special guest right now. And today we have the privilege of sitting down with a remarkable individual whose journey is a testament to resilience, courage, and a relentless pursuit of being uncommon in his personal and professional life. A graduate from Marquette University with a bachelor's degree in marketing and a focus on sales. He has embarked on a path of entrepreneurship early on. In his senior year of college, Isaac co-founded his first side hustle with three other students, winning a grant funding from Marquette University's Entrepreneurship Hub, and even catching the attention of the nation with a feature on Good Morning America. Although operations paused in 2021, the experience fueled Isaac's passion for innovation and the unconventional. Stepping into the realm of sales in 2018, Isaac's early promise led him to big tech, including a stint at DocuSign to a daring move as a founding outbound sales representative for a small remote first startup headquartered in France. Not confined to the traditional, Isaac embraced distance running in the late 2020, a commitment that evolved into marathon training with the goal of qualifying for the prestigious Boston Marathon. Living the digital nomad dream from 2021 to 2022, Isaac navigated the volatile tech industry until an unexpected detour prompted him to return to Seattle. Facing the challenge of injury post-marathon, Isaac turned his setback into an opportunity for self-discovery. Now, back in Seattle, he's focused on rehabbing his health, advancing his resilient mentality while pursuing a groundbreaking idea in the running apparel industry. Today, he joins us to share his experiences, challenges, and the wisdom gained along the way. He has shifted from being a goal-driven achiever to being a purpose-driven achiever and pioneer. Please welcome Isaac Feil.
Man, with the crowd too. No, that's a very kind intro, and yeah, thanks for bringing me on, Joy. I'm hyped to be on here with you guys.
It's such our pleasure. We're so looking forward to just like understanding some of your story, and you're always welcome to like dive deeper in what's ahead.
Cool. So I'll ask the first question since I've did so much deep. I did so much about you, and you've had such a significant background, so diverse, and you've already created your own footprint in the world. How did you develop your mentality in creating in creating an impactful lifestyle and identity?
Yeah, no, thank you, Eunice. And it was great being able to connect with you before we came on here to start recording. I actually was thinking about this pretty recently, and I realized that when I started thinking more creatively and tapping into that part of my mindset, it was in upperclassmen years of college is when that started. So before that, I had a very corporate mindset where I just wanted to like climb up the corporate ladder for a Fortune 500 company, and just it was very money driven and like all of that, right? And then like I started following Gary Vaynerchuk. Actually, he was the one who first kind of started making me think like that there was more to all of this, right, with your career. And say what you will about Gary Vaynerchuk, I think he's influenced a lot of people to explore like more creative or entrepreneurial outlets through their own interests. And so that's, that was a huge part of what got me starting to tap back into a more creative mindset.
With you tapping into more of your creative mindset, was that where you drew more into writing, or is that where you started to feel more inspired to learning more about stoicism? Like what was like how did you develop more of like, okay, I know I learned from Gary, but like, what was your next step after that?
So for me, I think that's what first opened up the idea of entrepreneurship to me. And,
Mm.
having something, a project, a side hustle, right? Even just something as simple as a hobby that you're kind of exploring,
Mm.
at least in public to some degree, on top of, whatever corporate job you might be trying to,
Mhm,
enter into, right? And so that's what actually like influenced me to sign up for my first couple entrepreneurship elective courses in college. That's what ended up causing the e-commerce business that I started with a
mhm,
couple teammates right in college.
mhm,
And so it was actually one video in particular he put out that was talking about risk. And
mm,
he was asking, like, how much risk you need to ask yourself, how much risk have you taken in your life? And
mm,
really think of, like, if you haven't at all, like there's always going to be stability that comes with that, but where
mhm,
will there be regret?
mhm,
And
mhm, mhm,
were you really exploring all of your interests, or were you just like serving someone else's your whole life? And so
mhm,
that's
mhm.
really what started, at least that side of it for me. And then, the writing came
Mhm,
through probably a year or two later, and my writing's morphed over time, right?
mhm,
But
mhm.
when I think about my evolution and kind of becoming more authentic with the content I'm putting out and more
Yeah.
true to myself, I think that
Mhm,
really did
mhm,
start with his influence. I don't really follow him as
mm,
much or as closely anymore, but
yeah.
I kind of pinpoint the start of that journey right back to that time.
I
Oh,
love that you oh, go ahead, Eunice.
oh no, I actually saw his post, like Isaac's post about like death, and you remember like you're scared of dying, and tell me, is
Mm,
the kind of life you lead really any different than being dead? Like it's really being
mhm,
connected to what you've like previously seen, like posted or like the
mm,
video from Gary. So since it's
Yeah.
shifted from Gary to like the Stoicism, how much like change does it like
mm,
happen in your mentality?
That's a very good point, because I remember it vividly hearing him on one of his videos like back in the day. And Gary put it so bluntly. He was like, "You're going to die. You're going to die." Like that, and that's it. Like if people would ask him like, "Hey, what's your best life advice you could give in 3 words?" And that's what he would say, and people would kind of be taken aback, right? And I think people's reaction is so funny, because people are always like taken aback, and they're like, scared, and they're like, "Oh, well, that got dark, or that got, real fast." I'm like, it doesn't have to be dark. It can be extremely invigorating, right? If you think about it the right way. And so I think, to address your question, Eunice, like, how did it change? I think, when I first started hearing that from Gary Vaynerchuk, I was like, you know, maybe even responding a little bit like that myself when I was younger. I was like, a little bit surprised, like, all right, so we need to act fast. Like, and that's when that idea kind of got planted as a seed in my head. But then when I started reading more about that concept of like memento mori from the Stoics specifically, they started to unpack it more. And that quote from Seneca, like, is the kind of life you lead really any different than being dead? That hit with me to the core. And I remind myself of that quote, like whenever I'm resisting taking action, right, on things I need to be doing. So whenever I'm like kind of resisting discipline, right, and doing things that I know will be good for me and things I won't regret doing, but they take that extra mental effort, as opposed to just opting into comfort or like pleasure, right, and habits like that. I'll remind myself of that quote, and I don't think there's been one time where it hasn't just kicked me right back into gear.
mhm, mhm. When it kicks you back into gear, is it from a place of your conviction of your values tied with your vision of like how you have integrity with your vision, like what kicks in for you? Because I think for sometimes people when they hear that quote, it actually either creates shame or a fear
Mhm.
response, or even like that sense of like, well, there's so much that like I don't know what to do, right? Like overwhelm. So I love how you like you yourself know authentically, like, I'm actually gonna use this for like not only my well-being, but like for like the people I want to impact, or just, just even every day of like, this is the mental discipline that I'm choosing to do for this specific task in the present now. So what does it evoke out of you?
Yeah. So I think, to your point, I think it evokes my, like, reminders to myself of my core values. So, for example, one of my core values is that every one of us has a creative essence in us, right? Separate from, or maybe tied to, but it could definitely be separate from, like, our work or our corporate jobs, right? And a lot of people neglect that for whatever reason. And that can be very good intentions. It's like having, like, things in life that come up and that they need to pay attention to first, taking care of a loved one who's really sick, right? Things like that. But somewhere along the line, like, we lose our creative essence to distractions that we sometimes have come up, or that we even inflict on ourselves. And, like, my core value is that I don't want to lose, like, my creative essence to, like, distractions in life that I start to prioritize even subconsciously. Like, I always want to protect that. And so for me, that quote evokes that value of, like, wanting to live that out. And I guess if I had to tie that value to, like, another driving force, it would just be legacy and reputation. Like, when I think about, like, down the line, like, I will die at some point. What do I want talked about at my funeral? Like, and again, I know this is starting to sound, you could say this is starting to sound really deep, but, like, I think about this stuff fairly often, and it's extremely driving, because I think, all right, well, what did Isaac live out? Did he, like, live out, like, his creative essence by channeling that energy right and always applying it no matter what, like, else was going on in his life, because he prioritized that? Or did he kind of just start to cruise and, like, let other distractions in life take hold and just kind of fade away from that? So those are the kinds of things that I guess go through my mind when I think of that quote. And, like, it just tells me that I have control over that response to
Mhm,
mortality.
mhm,
I have that control
mhm,
over retaining my values or not. And so every
mhm,
time,
mhm,
man, I'm like, if I opt into this, there's no reason I have to fear that quote. That, like, I
mhm,
can only use that quote to my control.
mhm, mhm, mhm. I like the how you explained your process. It has required you to take a lot of, time to reflect, a lot of it behind the scenes, in probably in various different stages, what has helped you gain clarity when you weren't able to finally like distill like, okay, what is my true values? Because you were at one stage of your life very like corporate, which is like, some of it is ego driven. Like I've been in that place for sure, of having these like such a drive from, our ego of like these desires, these goals have to be accomplished by this deadline. And, when I hit this corporate part of it, I get distinguished and all of that, we get really cluttered. So it's for you to shift in such a, I don't even want to say drastic. I think that you've just found a way that really feels like authentic, but is actually authentic with there's like a level of discipline. And through that, it has required you to, clarity. When you shared your things that you've written, it's distilled as like as simple as like you could tweet it. But we always celebrate the end product in a public way. Like, if you win a championship, now you're celebrated as a champion. Or, if you're able to distill all your ideas into a book, that's being celebrated. But it's always the stuff behind the scenes, like in the private. And you shared something about, like, in one of your writings about um, it's in those alone times that you practice not only discipline, because I even think we can even go on a tangent of that, like discipline has a negative association, but you also really stress and encourage so much of like the behind the scenes. So I kind of want to open the floor of like, what you wanted to describe as gaining clarity, or why you choose to value behind the scenes process personally and professionally, that it's not a switch on and off button for you. And I really think that it is still tied to your quote as well.
Yes. Yeah, there could be a lot to unpack there, but I'll do my best. So for me, I think there's just a couple components to set up. Like, first off, using your time alone wisely, and why specifically using your time alone wisely is an important catalyst to discipline, and then, ultimately, right, long term success in however you define success, right? So I'll start with those first couple things. For me, being able to incorporate a little bit of time in stillness, right? So, which I just define as solitary, screenless space. So it's private. There's no screens close to me. I might be by a fire. I might be reading a book, drinking tea, like a 75-year-old man. But that is an environment that I like to set myself up with by default. And what that does is it just allows my mind to free itself a little bit from all the noise of what we hear and see over the course of an entire day. We're so overstimulated that now what we see as recharging is actually still depleting our energy, because the way so many of us recharge all the time is by, turning on a screen, or like eating comfort food or something like that. And it's like still contributing noise to our day. And then we wonder why we're so burnt out. So, I started to realize I need to flip the script on how I recover, so that I can, like, put more focus and discipline into, the outlets I want to really explore in my life outside of work, and outside of, my social friendships. So, uh, like, for me, starts with just setting up that still environment. And then second, like, to your point, self-reflection has been like something I've started to take more seriously, especially as of late, the last couple years, and really go inward and say, all right, what do I, really want out of life? Having had certain things that I thought I really cared about, and even do really care about, like, temporarily taken away, right? So who am I without that? And that's when I started to define my core values. So going back to that example of, like, always protecting your creative essence, like, if I have that value, and, like, I'm able to realize that in a moment of solitary stillness, you know, then, like, my brain gets a chance to give that time and attention and energy to realize that. And that just carries through subconsciously then into my actions when I'm going through my day and I have a job to do. So that's kind of where it starts for me. And then, like, because you've given your brain not only a break with active recovery instead of just more noise, your brain now has that signal to help you, I guess, like, stay dialed in. And so that's like a huge reason why I think, taking direction in your life starts with being alone. But I have a blessing now of having gained pretty good clarity over the direction I want to take in my life. And so, like, that's a blessing I don't take for granted. Right. Having that direction now, I just need to apply the discipline. And so a lot of people might be wondering, well, what if I don't have that direction yet? What if I don't have that clarity? Um, I would say, on top of what I've just described with giving yourself the time to reflect on that, right, by being alone, you also need to be exploring, like, your interests and the communities you care about. Like, write it down, brainstorm that, get the ball rolling. You don't have to find your passion right away. Like, it's not going to happen the first time you give yourself 5 minutes to just breathe, right? That aha moment might not come immediately, but there's a lot of power in mastering, your thoughts when you're alone. And so I think for those reasons that I've started to describe, that's why it means so much to me.
That is like, those are really powerful. And just to quote you too, with your post, without a mission to chase excellence in, you'll never really know your own limits. And I also remember like Marcus Aurelius's like quote, like, it's time you realize that you have something in you more powerful and miraculous than the things that affect you and make you dance like a puppet. So I'm actually intrigued because you've actually shared that to me. So it's to me and
Yeah.
Joy. So can you tell us like the connection of that between adversity and like Stoic philosophy? Like how do you intertwine like Stoic thoughts with discipline, endurance, and courage for you to continually push into your purpose-driven mission?
Yes. No, thank you, Eunice, for that prompt, because that's like another one of my favorite all-time quotes from the books. And yeah, I think uh, with regards to kind of how it's affected my mindset, when I incurred my running injury in the qualifying marathon race for Boston, that was my goal. Uh, I've gone through every range of emotions since then, right? From just pure anger. Actually, immediately it was this like odd sense of calm and acceptance, because I didn't realize what it was yet. I thought it was going to be super temporary. I would just need rest for a month maybe, and then I'd be back. So I was actually pretty chill right when it happened. But this, then it morphed into, right, like kind of ambiguity and like, frustration. And then trying to realize like, okay, how am I going to go through, um, my normal operating day without being able to have that as an outlet, because that had become a full-fledged passion of mine. And I'll be willing to speak to that, but for now, I just want to say like that was definitely an event, an obstacle that happened externally that I couldn't have predicted, right? And created some conflict for me. And so that quote, right, is kind of a representative like idea that I didn't have to let that dictate how I would go about my life. And meaning, like, I started to, at one point, right, I would make excuses for not like giving my best effort or living my full potential, right, just because I wasn't able to run. I'd be like, well, like, I'm not able to run right now. So, like, why would I be able to be, 100% right now with certain parts of my life? And, it took a long time before I was able to realize that that excuse didn't have to be valid, and that, I could still tap into like my full energy and my full potential, right, without running. uh like, you might hear that and think, well, that's self-explanatory, Isaac, but when you think about the things that you love so deeply, that when you're doing it, like, you can't imagine your life without it. That's how strong that attachment can become. And so it's taken me a while to uh I use the term, I'm stealing it from an author, but the term decatastrophizing, and bringing it back down to earth. And so this quote, like, it's time you realize that you have something in you more powerful and miraculous than the things that affect you and make you dance like a puppet. It's what kind of enabled me to finally stop like giving myself so much undue slack. It's like, oh, well, I can watch this show and have a drink because like I can't run. It would be something as small as that, right? Whereas when I think of this quote, it's like, no, like, the things that make me great, the things that contribute to my work ethic, the things that contribute to like my energy are not like stemmed from running, as powerful as that has been in driving that out of me. Like, that's right in me, like, without anything else. And so once I've started to finally been able to realize that, um, it's extremely powerful for like resisting like comfort, right? And staying on the path of discipline. So that's a lot of the meaning for that quote for me.
That's really powerful because I've actually seen your post about like, please tell us more about like this, your barber who lives in
Yeah.
Vietnam. Um, so please also connect it with like, how do you communicate the, like your passion effectively? Because you've shared it like your barber, her passion is burning, and how is it actually influence you to be serendipitous in your life?
Mm, man. Man, this oh yeah, you guys with the questions, like you guys did your homework. I love it. Yeah. No, it's so I don't know if you were prompting this, Eunice, but it's that visualized value quote on serendipity. And it's like your luck surface area is defined by, how many people is how much time you spend working on something you're passionate about, and then multiplied by how many people you tell that to. So I love that few reasons, but I do believe you still have to like almost protect your like creative energy and idea that you have there, and that comes in the form of who you share it with as well. So I'm not always just like meeting up with people or like out in public and talking about what I'm doing, right? Unprompted like that, gets old real quick for people. So I'm very selective about when I bring it up. But like just the other day, I had a great meetup with a marathoner who's like in middle age, and she found running fairly late in her life. But once she did, she found the flywheel, the hook, and started from running a mile to here and there to now multiple marathons. And we just talked about everything from like running to completely non-running related things, like health, wellness, natural health, and overcoming like obstacles. Right? She talked about like obstacles that she'd overcome in her own life, and then how she was able to do that even better through running. Um, you know, and we talked about running apparel because like she is in the market, right? So I wanted to hear her take on like her apparel that she wears, right? And she was more than happy to discuss it at length because of all her frustrations. But I guess my point is like we were able to have such a collaborative conversation, and it was just around what we were passionate about, and that included multiple different things, and I think when you collaborate with people and you just spark ideas off each other like that, we were two very different people, but we were able to find like all these things that we both cared a lot about. And then that's when, the real ideas start to come out. And, like, you increase your luck surface area and serendipity, because like I was able to ask her like at the end of the conversation, hey, so if you know other like runners, right, who are wanting to have conversations like this, I'd love to connect with them. Doing research for this, I'd love to get in touch with as many people as possible, because this is a community I care about, and it's a community I care about bettering. But the first question I asked her was, what got you into running? It wasn't like, diving right into, well, what do you like and not like about your shorts? Like it was, I want to hear people's stories, because I think serendipity is about like, you put out an energy like to the world. And like if that comes off as like a love letter to the things and communities and people you care about, like that's going to come across, as opposed to being transactional about things.
Oh, I'm so glad we're talking about this. I think there's a few things I want to like bring before I ask you my question. Is one aspect of you that I admire is like you're so humanistic, and that means like basically you just come to be like, this is who I am, but you come to listen. Like I think that's probably one of your strengths, is that like when you like have developed all these people that you've come into contact, intentionally, or people just share their story with you. You just come to listen, and naturally, like, you are able to pick onto these nuances, and then your own passion and their passion gets kind of like grows a fire, and then now they just trust you because they see your goodwill of like you actually want to solve something that has been just like an aggravation for them, coming with a running empire. And that's just like one sliver of your life of like how you just come to listen. But I
Right.
think what happens is like when you are so ego driven or goal achieving, is that you have like these formulas in your mind that are like, well, this is the strategy. Like this is how I'm gonna like get to like find out if people are gonna like my product. And it's so strategy and transactional, and almost this like um the sense of like there's so much pressure around it too, of like I need to get that answer. I need this from you. And you have like, I have this word that I call it. It's like you have a certainty, but you have a relaxed trust. And so the relaxed trust comes from like, if I receive just one tiny tweak of like information, that's amazing too. But there's like such a relaxed trust because of like your surface, the surface like concept is that what is mostly intentional is us having this engaging conversation, and then so
Yes.
forth and so forth. So even like just hearing that one sliver of what you just shared, like represents um, you have so much clarity about yourself, and you have a level of remembering that even though you're so passionate that you don't want to um, like stonewall someone or override their story, because you recognize that their story is just as equally as engaging and to discover something. So um, I just wanted to just like affirm you on that process.
I appreciate it. No, and it's so true because as long as you are having the conversations with the right people, and you
Mhm,
know that then you have an audience who will be receptive to your ideas, and not only receptive, but like, enthusiastic the way you are,
mhm,
then as long as you enable them, right, to
mhm,
be like the hero of the conversation, you enable
mhm,
them to be their own hero,
mhm,
you you pass on to them that power to, uh, share their story and like
mhm, mhm,
their passion. And when that all comes out, it kind of just becomes this flywheel because then it fuels me,
mhm,
because
mhm,
of the commonalities that we have
mhm,
like established. And so, and then I learn from them and I
mhm,
gain more ideas, and
mhm,
it
mhm,
just continues to spin. So, it really is about like, uh, just having that, like you said, I think that relaxed trust comes from
mhm,
not having the blinders on of like this needs to be all business, because when, like you said, people have those blinders, it's like you lose kind of the soul of what you're doing.
mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
maintaining that soul of what you're doing is so key to stay, to put it in business terms, customer centric, but like to put
Mhm.
it in just real terms, like to stay real
Yeah.
with people. And because that's what makes like people want to support the cause that you are fighting for.
Mhm. I appreciate what you just said. It reminds me of this like leadership concept where there's two types of leaders. Like this is just like generalized, but the first one is this leader is driven by people serve him. So like your team serves, these are the leader sets the goals, sets the vision, and he expects and assumes that everyone will operate for that benefit, like for that goal. And there's the other type of leader where it's like he sets the vision, but it's just like this open door feedback. And that assumption is because he knows that his ideas are like a umbrella, but the response is that he's allowing so much flow of it to be enhanced because he understands that there's holes in his visions. He understands, or he or she understands that everyone else can bring something that enhances it. And when I like heard this concept, it makes me wonder for just like everyday people, right? We are all leaders in our life. We're leaders in our relationships. So it made me think of like how for you, you're in a place of like naturally practicing your leadership skills of like the open door flow. And it's interesting because now that will be translated to someone else where they'll, since I was experienced, that most, maybe most likely they could experience that with someone else. And so I wanted to even just like talk about on a stint of like how leadership is not, it's not in your corporate or it's not in your job, but it's like just like what you said, you've already started your mentality, you've already started like the action part of you. Does that resonate of even just like like there's a quote that says like to become a leader, like you have to just like be the leader for yourself.
Yeah, it really does. And in like two ways I'm thinking. So the first thought that came to mind right off the bat for me when you were saying that, you made me think of servant leadership. With the open door policy, it's like, uh, and that's actually something that I've been like, I've had instilled in me from a fairly young age, from upbringing, is like leadership is servant leadership, because you're enabling others, and in turn, right, uh, they will be extremely loyal to your cause in the best of ways, right, out of love instead of out of fear or any other driving force. And when you, like I said earlier, I use the term like when you work on something, you want it to read like a love letter, because that's what it should be. Like, yes, you can have your own incentives, like financial or otherwise. Like when you start a for-profit business, for example, that should be on your mind. But like, there needs to be more to it. And the reason I say love letter is because like the community who you're serving, they should be like the ones who are experiencing a better product or service that you're putting out for love of the game or the sport, or whatever it is, whatever space you're in, right? You're giving back to that, with your talents and energy and mind power to make that space better, with what you're putting out for those people. And that's kind of how I view servant leadership. But like to your point, like being your own leader is how that starts. Because like for me, for example, like with the running apparel, I'm doing that for the running community, not just because, but because I care deeply about it, because I am a runner and I've experienced these frustrations, and I was wondering if other people did too. And it turns out they have. And it's like this vehement, frustration, right, that's out there that can be solved. And so that's like, I guess, what keeps me like focused on just those day-to-day actions, is continuing to work on that.
I appreciate what you shared. I do want to like include the audience to speed them up. Um, so when I originally met you, Isaac, through Instagram, this was years ago, you were like doing a digital nomad, and then you were telling me about Stoicism. And then when I ended up, we were connecting, you're just like telling me your conviction of like how wanted, how you realize I am so irritated of this, like, there's running up power, right? Because of just, even just, you started noticing of, the fabric and just the use of it. And I can relate because through track and soccer, same concept of just like, oh, there's this aggravation, but there's this level of like, in everything in our life, we tolerate something. We just found it, you know what, it's just acceptable. I'm just going to tolerate. But then when I met with you and we talked later on, is that you ended up choosing something to solve that's usually seen as like unsolvable or that's too unthinkable, because our own logical mind, or our own limited mind at times, is like, it's not worthwhile. How is that possible? Everyone else has represented that it's not going to be resolved. And so I think even the concept of like you bringing up later, earlier with Eunice, was like how you have such a like conviction of like being in your greatness, or being common, but at the same time leading with like a normalcy of, but this is what I do, like a naturalness. Because I think sometimes our ego is like, this is what I do, and it's like so rigid in it, and doesn't want to even expand out of that ego self-image. And then so I kind of want to touch upon like maybe even like your own, how do you make definitions in your life or frameworks through not only stoicism but things you've read, that either you can apply it to like you're running a power where you're like, I know it seems unsolvable, but in my heart, or where I'm at right now on the stage, this is solvable to me. So I kind of wanted to like open-endedly, you can use it for your running apparel. You can even use it in your personal life of creating definitions or challenging your prior definitions because you've gone through adversity. And also just like when do you know, oh, I need to update this? It's like I kind of gave you a threefold, but I'll let you, go with what feels the most resonating.
Sure. Could you please repeat the first question that you had? Because
No
yeah, I
problem.
just want to
I
make
know.
sure I don't go, off the chain here.
I think one is just like what helps you or what helps you define your own definitions, right? Maybe even another word for definitions is when you realize, oh, this is my belief system for regarding my mentality. There was a gap prior where I wasn't as mentally disciplined. Like you even said just something so casual. If someone's like, it's fine if I have another drink, but for you're like, oh, I see. I've allowed this to be acceptable.
Right.
I've allowed this to be tolerable for me. So I wanted to just like openly be like, how did you create your own definitions, or what did
Mm.
you, what has helped you realize I need to expand my definition around just things that I value: mentality, discipline, way you live.
Sure. Yeah. So for me, I'd say, growing up, actually, even as early as middle school, like that was when the first time I started to develop, right, of value for all intents and purposes, or a definition of a value. So for me, that was work ethic, right? And it was like in middle school when I started taking like school and sports seriously. I know that's like a reach, right, to go back to, but that has stuck with me ever since. And so that's why, like, I bring up where that pinpointed. But for me, ever since, work ethic has been like a core character trait I've wanted to keep in the plus column, right? Keep in the green, because it's like done so much for me back, and like I've been able to reap rewards from it, both like on the surface tangibly and also intangibly for my own self esteem. And so for me, like defining that in high school was like middle school and high school was okay. Like, I'm in these honors and college prep classes, right? AP, University of Washington, Seattle U courses. And then on top of that, like 3-sport athlete. So, after school, right, I have sports practice that I got to do. And then like I got to do my homework, have dinner, and then repeat the next day, And so even though like that was looking back, right, a fairly uh, like structured and therefore like easy to follow path, right? That's kind of what set me up for maintaining that value after high school. So then in college, right, a lot more homework, a lot more studying, a lot more projects, and like a little bit less structure. But because I kind of defined uh, what work ethic meant to me in high school, like, going to the library for like a few hours straight, and staying focused when I needed to for tough classes in college just came naturally, and it kind of continued to snowball from there. And I think one thing I had to do to redefine like a lot of my values after college was revisit all that, because suddenly then after college, right, for the first time in my life, I didn't have that like structure, at least in the sense of I knew exactly what my next step or what I was chasing was. First it was the high school degree, then it was a college bachelor's, right? And then suddenly it's like, all right, now just like go collect a paycheck and have fun. If like for all intents and purposes in your 20s, that's like what people tell you. And so, I had to define, well, what does work ethic mean now? Continuing with that example. And for me, it came back to, all right, like it'd be easy to like just stay in a job and then like outside of that, just have fun with friends, do my thing. But like I knew, right. And from when we first started this conversation this morning, like talking about like kind of embracing your entrepreneurial side that you have, right? I knew I had that at that point because I'd gotten a taste of it and I fell in love with it. I like from, Daryl's podcast, I don't know if you remember, but like I talked about the night I fell in love with entrepreneurship, right? And I won't like retell all that, but it was basically spending 14 hours like changing our website from Wix to Shopify the night before the Good Morning America article dropped on our business. And like that was in the middle of finals week. And I was like, I should have been studying for the 3 finals that I have today. But hey, that's how it goes. And I didn't regret any of it. And ever since, I knew that this is, something I wanted to keep in my life. And so another thing that has really influenced me in like continuing to nurture that mentality and define not only work ethic, but then adding on creativity to it and maintaining a creative life. I go back to this quote from Naval Ravikant, venture capital investor, author, speaker. He said, first off, he has multiple quotes that come to mind. He said, never become jealous of anyone because you would have to trade your entire life with them then to be accurate in like wanting their life. And I look at that and I say, I would never want to trade my life with anyone else. But the main quote that I think of in regards to this is he said, let's see, I don't want to lose it. Become the best in the world at something. And adjust that statement, keep adjusting that until it's true. And I was like, man, like you really can keep doing that. You can keep like moving the needle and maybe it's adding on a couple phrases to a sentence, right? But like that stuck with me. And I think so many people sell themselves short. And they think, well, I'll never be the best in the world at something. And it's like, you don't like have to be the best at like this huge endeavor, right? So for me, for example, I don't have to be the best in the world at running. I don't even have to be the best in the world at designing running apparel, but maybe I can become the best person in the world at designing naturally sourced or naturally made running apparel because I don't see it being done. And that it isn't like I had that vision for a while. Like that's been something, it's taken a lot of time to continue exploring my interests and building up like my values and turning that into a vision and then realizing that I could actually go far with that vision. And whether that happens or not, right? Regardless of outcomes, like with the theme of stoicism, I'm trying to nurture that every day and through my actions and, by reminding myself of that. And so I kind of come back to that quote a lot. To kind of keep that definition of greatness because it's just helped me like stay focused so much.
And I think it actually resonates to you so much because one of your posts says work ethic only compounds from consistent output. And on your LinkedIn banner, it says repetition, 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 repetition. And then at the end, it's like reputation. And you're like really putting in like, you're really you have the timing now because this is like the first thing. And like, in the apparels industry and right you're putting in the time in and you're really putting in your time, so how do you keep pushing forward? Because there are times like you have the passion, like you're timing in, but sometimes it's deflating, so how do you keep the fire burning?
Yeah, that's and that's the age old question, right? Because it's like what do you do when you don't feel like working out, those days where you don't feel like working out, or
Mhm.
other things that come to mind where you love something and you need to be working on it, but some days you just don't feel like it. And for me, like I'm actually a heavily momentum based person. And the
Mhm.
way, what I mean by that is like I'm susceptible to it, maybe more than the average person. So when I get going on something, uh, I am able to stay focused in it for lengthened periods of time, and that will continue to snowball. But when it breaks, then it takes me a little bit more to get going back on it. And so even like this like couple weeks ago, right? We had Thanksgiving weekend.
Mhm.
So my brother came up to visit. I spent time with my family, right? The whole
Mhm.
weekend, extended family, and I loved it. There was
Mhm.
no moment about it that I regretted, right? It was an extremely good time. But after that, right, is like, oh man, I indulged a little bit. Had some stuffing, had some turkey, had some leftover stuffing and turkey, right?
Uh-huh.
Had some wine, through the course of the
Mhm.
weekend, right? Tasted some
Mhm.
wine with my family, and it's like I fell out of the routine that I'd
Mhm.
been rolling with for a while. And so, that's what I think about, right? When you ask that, Eunice, like, so what keeps that fire going? Because then it took a little bit to reignite that. So for me, it takes a little bit of time, but I think it just goes back to give yourself a little bit of space, a little bit of time
Mhm.
to drown out the noise, and kind of
Mhm.
like just relax, sit back a little bit, and just let your mind wander without a screen, going back to stillness.
Mhm.
And from there, it's just a matter of like reciting those couple lines that we've talked about already,
Mhm.
you know, um, reflecting a bit on, all right, well, what do I need to get back into?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and even if it just takes like moving a little bit, I'm
Mhm.
limited right now in what I can do. But like I can still I can drop down and do some push-ups. I
Mhm.
can still
Mhm.
like move my legs. I can hop on a bike
Mhm. Mhm.
for a
Mhm.
little bit and just get the blood flowing, wash my face and, maybe even listen to a little bit of instrumentals, and just kind of but stop, breathe, tap back into that energy that I know I have. And once I'm able to draw from that, then I just let myself have that moment
Mhm.
and I'm able to kind of start back in. And I let myself ease in, so
Mm.
when I'm not feeling fired up, I don't try to do too much. I just say, hey, just
Mm.
for 5 minutes, I want to read, or for 5 minutes, like I need to do three mobility, rotations. Like I don't need to do the full routine maybe. But
Mm.
because like I'm anchored in a certain like competitiveness, right? Once I
Mhm.
start doing it, I have to do the full thing.
Yeah.
So
I can totally relate,
that's
Isaac.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's a hack. Definitely with the like athletic side of things, but
Mhm.
with the mental things, it's been tougher. And so I guess just first giving myself that space and then trying to tap back into that energy, reciting some lines if I need to, right? What I'm referring to, namely, there, right, is like Seneca's
Mhm.
quote on fear of death, because
Mhm.
that's what sparks initiative. Marcus's
Mhm.
quote on um, not letting the things that affect you dance like a puppet. Like I interpret that in a few ways, right? But a lot of that goes back to like controlling my response to feelings, wanting to go toward comfort. Seneca's
Mhm.
fear of death, though, like triggers a response to mortality. So it's what kind of initiates my proactive action.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'll think about that. And like, then I'll think about other role models I have in my life, right? Other influencers. We've talked about Bruce Lee, right? He's
Mhm.
talked about like, harnessing like just that like fire that he knows he has in him
Mhm.
through like everything he does. And like when you read about it, the way he talks about it, it's like, he feels like running through a wall,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
and so if you can harness that, then you can just start to rebuild that reignition, right? But it's not
Mhm.
something that just turns on instantly. You got to kind of like build up that momentum again.
I like your process. So when I listen to someone, I'm like collecting all these like dots. I'm like, oh my god, that. And so the first thing that like I initially kind of like took me by surprise was because I assumed like my my problem was that you just like instantly can get back into your flow or your momentum. So that's like I wrongly assumed that. And instead, you taught me something so like is so obvious and a no-brainer to me was like, you're like, no, I just ease into it. I'm just gonna read maybe it's a few pages, or I'm gonna just like start with one mobility drill. But it just taught me how sometimes so powerfully when we're so overstimulated, especially our nervous system, like you talked about when we are consuming or just allowing something to just basically avoid and distract, we're still in the background. Our nervous system is very tense. And so when you told me to ease, it like showed me already, like, because I work from home, I was like, oh, okay, I can practice easing just like in another aspect. And so I've been recognizing for myself, like I do bilateral tapping. So bilateral means like I tap on one part of my body, and I tap on the other parts because it connects your self-talk or you calming yourself down together with the right and left side of your brain together. But sometimes my intention going into the tapping is like, oh, I'm so tense, right? There's so much edge.
Mm,
And like you just taught me to be like, if I could just like breathe with the ease, like just ease, I would probably not be like a roller coaster like this and then trying to like slowly go down and just like ease. And I was like, wow, I can just shift just something that seems obviously a no-brainer of just other aspects, right? Like starting to write. Sometimes I go in with that energy of like, hey, I have a lot to write. And like ease would be, we're just gonna write for the first like 10 minutes and you're taking all your unfiltered thoughts. So I think that's so powerful that you already know that sometimes it's so important for just a sequence to know that you're practicing your ritual, but you have the sequence is correct. So like ease is the first part of your sequence of like you going into it. Um, because sometimes we do a strategy, but we're not in ease, where there's like high tension, there's a lot of pressure, like this has to be done in like
right.
an X amount of time. And so I just wanted to like show that significance. Maybe you didn't even like see how that might have been like profound for you or for someone else. And then what was also interesting was that you have a with your definition of discipline, there is a flexibility, but there's a firmness with the value. So I wanted to bring in both of like the flexibility is that you allowed yourself to experience the full life of life with your family, with things of your activities, but the firmness is that you still choose to go back to it because this is towards your values and towards your direction.
Right.
Has your definition or even just the way of what discipline and mental discipline has evolved from before to like, even currently right now?
Definitely. And it definitely relates to both points of what you were just talking about because like when I was younger, right, it turned into like that toxic hustle that people have now labeled as an entire culture, and so I wouldn't let myself turn off. But then what started happening, right, is then I would be compromising aspects of my health that weren't good in the long run, and so from always having to be on, like at one point, my senior year, I was like meeting up with project teammates at like 11 p.m. or midnight on weeknights because that was when we found the time to meet, right? Because everyone was working multiple jobs. One of my teammates like she was a triple major on top of working multiple jobs. And it's like, yeah, we were all so dialed in, but that isn't a sustainable way to operate. And so that's evolved over time for me because now what I'll do is like I'll let myself, go to zero, recharge, and then ease back in, and I'll let myself have those aspects of life that like I cherish because that was the other aspect of why I brought that up earlier with kind of the toxic hustles. Like I wouldn't let myself have those parts, even if I was engaging in them. I felt guilty for engaging in them, and I wasn't even present with my friends or family. I was just like beating myself up for not working. And that's like obviously not healthy. So, like over time now, it's like I've realized the fact that like I have close friends who I care a lot about. I have family who I obviously love and care a lot about. And so like those are things to add to my life, right? They're not like taking away from my work ethic. In fact, they're fueling it in their own way. Uh, Whether they're inspiring me to, do better, or like just uplifting me. And so now it's like I let myself, you know, recharge, right, in those more active recovery type ways, and just like have that space to kind of bring myself back to center before I make another push.
Such a you have you ever been to Japan, Isaac?
No.
You remind me of having these like Japanese philosophies. So one of them is
Wow.
like longevity. And so even from and they're very they have a way of honoring every aspect of life. But one of the ways they honor is like if they're going to be doing something, whatever that activity, there's like just all their focus and attention is like on that activity, and then you move on to another aspect, whatever the next activity. But they choose, when they do it, they're also recognizing that there's like a longevity of life. And so kind of like it's like you can still have an intensity of intentionality, but you have to remember that there is the relaxed trust of the longevity of your life, of like if I
Yeah.
hustle, right? Or we try to pursue all of our ego-driven goals within like whatever manufactured timeline that we thought that would make us feel significant, which usually leads to burnout, isolation, frustration, doubt, more imposed, worries or whatever concepts that someone struggles with. But then that relaxed trust of longevity kind of reminds me of how you you have a security of your own longevity, but then you also have a everyday conviction of pouring into it. Kind of reminds me like you take surface luck, and another concept wise, I just noticed it right now, of the
Mm.
not even mortality, but it's kind of like that. I just recognize that right now of like you just like pouring into it, but then also um allowing that expansion of that. But Eunice, is there anything that you wanted to ask Isaac around like more stoicism, some of the things that he's writing about?
Yes. So is it really important to like write? Because right now I think writing is very essential for you. And right now it keeps on evolving. Like you do have like the dream amplified, and right now you're posting on Instagram, and I've read like everything. So the evolution of it is like it's like literally going back to like mental like making like making your priority, like your mentality should be like your priority. And I think it started, I didn't realize it when you started at like the confidence box, because you said like people are
Yeah.
so burnt out, and then the mentality in there is like you just want to have to make sure that the people around us, or like we ourselves, has like this mentality of stillness. So with that, like, is writing very essential? Journaling, like what are like the tips that you can give to people so that they can have that stillness, so that they can feel at ease? Because usually people are just so tense up, like I should be on the rat race, like I should run. But when once they actually stop, how can they actually like try to face down, like you said, we're going to read books. So how about like you, I think you love about, yeah, like how we can synthesize our thoughts and like make sure like we're able to find like which one is like noise and which one is really matter. So yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, and to both what Eunice has just been kind of prompting, and then Joy, to your last comment, even about like that, what I thought of when you were describing that process is the term like slow grind, right? And it's like it's interpreting like these philosophies. I'd love to hear more about actually how it, like how the East incorporates it, because I know Europe is big on it. Like actually, when I was with the startup out of France, they talked about the French and Italian like concepts of like the slow grind, and then to Eunice's point, like activities that help like keep things in perspective and keep that pace going. And for me, writing has been a huge transformation, I guess, for me in learning how to pace, you know, like my work. And so like for me, yeah, like Eunice said, you know, the journey with content started with like the mental health content. I ran the social media page for Confidence Box. You know, talked a lot about mental health, burnout, stress management, right, and all those things. Then with Dream Amplified, I spun that page off of kind of my experiences with that, and then in college, and then with athletics, just to talk about health and creativity in general. And then that kind of evolved into a newsletter where I was sharing it much more directly from my own experiences and not just like other people's influence, right? And so now, you're right, it's still that newsletter that's ongoing where I just talk about like health and creativity. And it's just writing a bit about like, you know, my mentality and trying to extract value from my thoughts, right? From those experiences. And one promise I made to myself when I started writing, so to address like Eunice's question about kind of how people can get into it, because I think it's so important actually to have writing as a habit in your life, or at least something adjacent to writing, a habit that makes you self-reflect and call out your own thoughts. I promise I made to myself when I started writing was that I would keep it as concise as possible. So when I first started the newsletter, like my first couple, you know, send outs were like a paragraph long. They were like 5, 6 sentences long, right? And then I realized I probably had a little bit more space to work with. People were giving me good feedback, and they were saying, Isaac, we want you to go a little bit more here. Like, we want you to go deeper because you're hooking me. Like, I would just love to get like deeper into your thoughts. And so that's when I started writing more threads specifically that were a little bit deeper on my thoughts, and they were coming from like my experiences, which I was engaging with the most often. So I started writing a lot more threads on running. I started writing threads about what I admired in my friend, like my close circle's personalities. You know, I like, you guys probably have seen that. It's like writing about what I admired in my friends. That was a very powerful exercise because it made me realize, like, okay, these are things that then I want to emulate. And like, I even noticed that I had started to try and emulate them subconsciously, right, in my own life. And so it's become a very powerful form of not only like self-reflection, but then like activation, you know, and how I live my life. But how it started was, you know, just write like for 5 minutes, you know, on this, and make it about something that I care a lot about, so that it's easy to write, you know, and that I won't resist talking about it. If it's forced in any way, you know, if it's a topic that I feel like I need to write about because it's important or it's trending, like, you will burn out, you will stop the habit. But like, once I started writing about like, oh, hey, I hit up this city like now while I was traveling, right? And like, this is what I liked about the people, and this is what I'm doing right now. Or, man, like, I just ran, you know, my first half marathon yesterday, and this is how I felt afterward. Once I started like tapping into like, you know, why I enjoy the things I'm doing and why I enjoy the people I'm connecting with, then it started making writing easier. And I'm still working on like consistency with writing, you know. But like, the more I involve like people who I care a lot about and communities I care a lot about, and then ideas or philosophies I care about, the easier it gets. And I have never regretted afterward, like a session of writing. I've never felt like I wasted my time. And I think it's important for people to note that I never considered myself as a writer up until like the last couple of years. You know, it was not something I prioritized in my life. I've never journaled or had a diary growing up. Like, I was just outside running around and kicking a ball or shooting a ball, you know? So I hold it in extreme significance now. And it's actually one of the habits I want to continue to improve in consistency, because I think it has a lot of value to offer.
I like how I didn't know you had a prior background where you're just like, I didn't do writing. So that to me shows me that anyone can really pick it up. I think it's like we have maybe a fear of how unknown writing can begin. Like, what am I going to write about? I'm afraid to address those thoughts. Like, what I really believe in. And I think it's like all these different series of stillness, choosing to be in still, choosing to not have like, distractions through the social media or, and then that process of now you're facing yourself. And for me, I don't know if it's similar for you when you write. I don't really have a clear understanding what I'm going to write about, but I always know going in that more is going to be revealed to me than I expected. And so if I come in with such a curiosity and desire, more reveal is going to be expected. And I think this year I really learned that I have been over editing my voice over time because I was learning so much from like business strategy, marketing strategy. They're telling me this is how you should follow closely to the template and guideline. And then I remember this is like Eunice, she was right with me through these times that I would be like, Eunice, I have all these like bubbling ideas, but when I start writing, it feels so fragmented. It feels so unauthentic. And I remember just starting to just say, I don't know why my voice has been so overly edited. I don't know why I like bite my tongue before I'm about to write. And I just started just being as honest as that. And that kind of distilled writing for me of recognizing like, wow, I had so much frameworks. I had like perfectionism coming in. And if anyone just like felt like that sense of like that tension, then I'm like, oh, this is your invitation to just write as for you as a writer, or for you to write. Do you ever feel sometimes there's tension bubbling up in you, even before you write or as you're writing? You can kind of feel like you don't know what's being revealed, but you kind of feel like
Yeah.
the body and soul is like, we're ready.
Yeah, no, before I write, that's what I'm feeling and I'm like, it's this odd mix of emotions, right? It's like maybe a little bit of resistance to just sitting down and putting the pen to paper for whatever reason, mixed with like a little bit of, yeah, I don't want to say writer's block, but like just a little bit of like, yeah, ambiguity or confusion, right? Like my mind's a little bit uh, like wound up, but then like if I just get it done and I force myself to like sit down in the chair and just pick up the pencil. And when I say get it done, I don't mean pound out a writing session, but I just mean sit down in the chair, pick up the pencil, and just tell myself I'm gonna write a little bit. Um, then it starts to unwind my mind and untangle my thoughts as I'm going, and that you can kind of start to enter a place of like a more natural flow state as you're writing. And like Eunice, brought up, it's like when you have that like confusion around, oh, what am I gonna, or I guess you were talking about, Joy, like, what am I gonna write about? Um, that's where like the notepad, yeah, is oftentimes gonna lead you to the answers and like new thoughts come up. And that's been the beauty of it for me is then I've like had these takeaways that I've developed that I can apply to my life just from writing. So
Mhm.
that's been my experience kind of when I go through my writing process.
So interesting. So Eunice is reading Ego's Enemy by Ryan Holiday. I don't know if you're familiar. He's like a modern Stoic interpreter. I'm gonna say interpreter.
I've heard of him.
Um, so what was interesting is that what she described was like one of the quotes was about um, basically not to fool ourselves, not to fool ourselves of like our self-image, not to fool ourselves of all of our ideas of our specialness. But the purpose of even for him is like he has learned to create meaning in his life, but to do meaningful work. And so even with writing, how do you distinguish if that's more of like, oh, that seems like that possibly could be ego, or that could possibly be a thought that is being defeating, like a defeated thought, discouragement thought. But how did you transition to either allow it or to able to distinguish? Because I think that's a part of like your mentality. You're really good at distinguishing because I think you've taken the time, and the skill to recognize. So even if I think it's acceptable to have like ego talk, like that comes through writing. But for you, do you recognize, oh, I know where this would lead if I like allowed myself to be fooled by it, or allowed myself to, just to accept it? So do you have moments of that, of distinguishing, or moments of recognizing, oh, that's an ego?
Definitely. So for me, and this is why I think so many people misinterpret content creation as egotistic, is because like they might see people who are putting out content or putting out their thoughts, but they're not really trying to extract value from their thoughts. They're just sharing things about themselves for the sake of sharing. And so for me, when I'm writing, my pinpoint of trying to drop my ego is, you could interchange the terms, like extracting value from my thoughts is when I'm dropping my own ego from my writing, because that's when I'm deciding that this is for the betterment of other people. Like, and hopefully when they read what I'm posting, they find something that helps them in their lives. And that's what I define as value. To go back to definitions, right? It's like, if people can see something and read it and not just keep scrolling and say noise, but they stop and they read it, that's signal. And that's a rare, scarce thing nowadays. But when I am like going through my raw writings, right, my journal, so like I'll, write in my notebook first, kind of with all my thoughts on a certain topic, right? And then I'm not going to post all that though. I'll say, all right, so what are the takeaways then from this? And I'll kind of highlight them. I don't use a highlighter, but I'll highlight them in my head and I'll put them on my notes on my phone. And I'll be like, all right, so this is kind of what I have gotten out of this. These are the things that I've like learned. And then that's what I post. And to me, I guess that's how I distinguish ego from like just pure value, you know?
Eunice, do you have something to say about ego? I see it on your smile.
No, I was the word TLDR is coming into my mind because Isaac posts like a carousel for like there's like explanation of everything. Then like the last part is TLDR. And I was like, he's like he knows what people is thinking. Like like this is okay, like you're just going to scroll just to see the end of it, but and it's very nice that you're very intentional to like to the people, what people are thinking. So when these things are happening, so if you do think like people will not is not going to read it, what do you think are like, do you think ego is like talking to you like, should I just make it shorter, or are you just like editing more of your post?
I love this
No,
candid question because we
yeah,
all can
no, I
relate to
love
this.
that question. Same
Yeah.
here. I've thought about it. I'm like, do I need to just put out more single picture posts, that are like, you can read in one tweet, because that's what'll be absorbed. I've had those thoughts before, and I'm not objected to those, right? I think you can still have value in a single screenshot post, but I guess the reason I haven't been afraid to do the longer threads that take up all 9 photos that you can add on to Instagram, right? When you're taking your tweets to Instagram, is like, because one, to admit, I've gotten very limited, but I have gotten like external validation from people, right, who have come back and been like, Isaac, this really resonated with me. Like, you were speaking thoughts that I couldn't have articulated myself, but this really helped me out today. And so that's been a great like external like motivator, that I'm on track, right, with my writing, and that it's putting out value for people. But intrinsically, right, I just try to focus on that, because you take away the external factors, what is your intrinsic motivation? And so for me, it's like, I know that I'm sharing my authentic experience, and then doing my best to share takeaways that are applicable to other people, even if they apply different topics, right? Not everyone runs, not everyone, like,
Mhm,
etc.
mhm,
But they can still take like thoughts from my passions and my experiences and apply it to their own lives. um, I'm doing the best I can to that, and
mhm,
like
mhm,
I'm leading with that, and then like there's a that puts out a certain authenticity that I think and hope gravitates with people.
mhm,
And that's kind of
mhm.
how I control that voice, right? Is just to
Yeah.
make sure that that continues to come off as signal instead of noise.
What I just noticed, I'm sure that each of us can relate, is that if you're writing in an authentic voice or even expressing yourself right now, like in these private circles or just, through writing, and then when it has to be shared on a public platform, and then the fears or external conditions that we've made on ourselves, like, oh, but less people would like really read it, whatever. I've had those before, because I've shared with you guys like how I was just so curating everything where I was like, oh, I want to be so likable, like I know these are the contents that people like to hear, and it would seem so innocent, but like me being off social media has been like, wow, like that's why my voice was so over edited. But what I recognize is that doing that, if you're writing it authentically behind the scenes, and then when it came to sharing publicly, you're almost telling yourself and subconsciously, like, you're only good to share authentically in these circumstances, but to share publicly, I'm denying you what the gifts you gave me and the experience that you gave me is not placed to be shared. It's like there's a mismatch. So for you to avoid that it shows your level of like, right, the authenticity, integrity, your courage. And I also like it really proves, like, on an ego way, being like, these are the people that really resonate, like they read through everything, they read, I've done that, like I'm like, read, save, read, and
Yeah.
so I think that it's like I learned right now that I would deny myself, that I got to experience that, but I'm denying it further expansion to even share it, because of ego's like, desire for the me to see and the fears and the control. So I just wanted to just like affirm you, like keep moving forward on that. I have to tell you this concept that I've been going through, and I wanted some of your thoughts. And Eunice knows about this. So I've been officially off of Instagram. I don't know, like
Please.
now it's like, is it almost a month, Eunice? Like she's been using my account, by the
Yes.
way.
Yes.
Okay. So
Nice.
I only use YouTube. So I don't use any other accounts. So that's the only way I gather like information. And one of the reasons why I stopped doing Instagram is like it was just too overstimulating in a sense. And because I've been off of it, I told her, and I was like, I don't know any trends going on. Not that I cared, but I was like, I'm actually living a FOMO free life. Like a FOMO free life of I just don't my subconscious and just my way of living is just like right now, here and now. I'm choosing to have my own level of stillness. And maybe that's a little too extreme for someone, but when I've been learning about my own definition of FOMO free life, I'm like, what does that really mean? Because I really don't have a fear of missing out anymore. And I used to also have a FOMO of a fear of missing out on success. So that was one of like what I've learned now being off
Mm.
of social media, that it was being reinforced of like, I'm missing out on the success. I'm missing out on some success concept. I'm missing out on like my own success. I'm behind. And so without that, now I've just been refining that. I think FOMO free life for me means like I get to choose what and what matters. So like doing this podcast with you guys is like part of that FOMO free like evidence. And I wanted to just explore with you if you've even like um had like FOMO, like you're like, I don't resonate with FOMO anymore. Or you have times where you do still feel like you're like, oh, I'm trying to challenge that belief around FOMO, or like FOMO around your pace of life or any of those concepts.
Well, and I want to ask you about like, your level of focus, like after
Oh
being
my
off
gosh.
social media. Yeah.
It's been so, oh my God. I didn't even realize I have like what you said, like you can just be in like this momentum, but the momentum is because there's such a deep calmness.
Yes.
There's not this curiosity, like, hey, you should go check it on. There's not even like now there's not even a thought that goes, oh, I am feeling really pain tolerance from writing, or doing this, like, recording this video, like when I say pain tolerance, it's like there's something that I hit, like some type of like perceived roadblock where I'm like, I'm just gonna give up. I'm gonna go use, Instagram. That was my form to just give me a quick escape. And so I was creating that pattern, right? If I ever hit a pain tolerance that my body was like, I'm frustrated, it would go to, for me, with social media. And now when I have a level of pain tolerance, it's less, like less in frequency and duration. And so now I have just a longer window of like just working, and there's a more natural response where my body's like, you know what, we are feeling drained. Let's just go outside and take a walk. It's like I just starved it so much that it seems non-existent in my mind. And so I realized how what was acceptable and conditioned was obvious back then, and now I don't have it. And so it's like I have another natural choice and a natural, but my nervous system, for sure, my brain is just on a deeper like calmness and focus, and enjoyable. It's like a great enjoyable, because before I was kind of already priming myself, being like, this is going to be hard at within 90 minutes. I know it. But I have Instagram.
Yeah. Well, oh, and so see, there's so much about that that's really cool, because it's like you're not constantly depleting yourself anymore,
Mm-mm,
but like
mm-mm.
disguising it as, like as as taking in information, right? Or even knowledge,
Mhm,
right? Which is
mhm, mhm.
oftentimes a lot of ambitious people's problem with social media, right? Is the type of content we're absorbing
Yeah,
is like, oh yeah, this could make me better, or yeah,
yeah.
oh, I'm getting overwhelmed because now I'm comparing myself to this successful person,
Mhm,
right? It's like
mhm, mhm,
I need to do more, right? And so you're continuing
mhm.
to put your brain in hyperdrive.
Yes.
But when you remove that, and to answer your question, like for me, my experience has been, it's been great having a separate page on Instagram
Mm,
than my personal one, because then I can toggle to my personal page only for responding to messages, with catching up with friends, right? But outside of that, I try to stay on my writing page, because it just keeps me focused, and then I don't really feel incentivized or driven to like be scrolling or like looking at suggested material or anything like that on my personal page, because I'm following 10 people. So, and I'm there for a reason. Like I'm there on that page to be putting out content, not intaking it. And so like that's kind of how, being off, and as a result, then I'm on Instagram a lot less often than I used to be. And so to your point, like it is really nice, because then there's actually like, to apply your thought of like real joy, it's like the like stoic joy is like the joy that comes from not just chasing like dopamine or comfort or pleasure like all the time, because once you
yeah.
actually like deny that gratification, you actually start to feel this like real energy and positivity
Mhm,
and
mhm,
self-confidence that comes from like
mhm,
rejecting that consistently. And it's actually a real happiness that like people see, because it's palpable. They don't know
mhm,
why. And that's if I could change one thing like right now, it would be that more people get to experience that, because I think people are depleting
mm,
themselves so much, and social media has a lot that's good, but I think that's one of the cons of social media, is that it's depleting people under the guise of recharging,
mhm.
you know?
I hear you so much. I can touch on a few things. So one is you touch on a true positivity or true joy. Obviously, we through stillness and through clarity, you'll learn more as you go and understand what is your true joy. Because as you evolve, those things
Yes.
do evolve with you. So I would agree on that. Through this year, I'm thinking that's why you and I are similar, of like just letting go of like our prior self images, and our we were very proud of those identities. It has brought us lots of milestones, but at the same time, it was we created our own limits, unfortunately. And so evolving, even just like being off of like social media, um gave so much like space of being like, well, who are you without it, right? Who are you if you're not interacting? Like, all of those kind of who are you questions. And through the FOMO free was one recognizing like, wow, I actually get to distill what is my strategy in life without being like, oh, I need another one. Like this is going to be the one. And I think that it comes from deep security and like that relaxed trust I was telling you about.
Yes.
And I also recognize that through Stoicism, that was probably one of my first introductions to it. Was I think it's through Ryan Holiday, but I went to go back and recognize where it was coming from. But it was like he was describing like what you said, like we have blurred the lines that positivity or experiencing levels of positivity is through comfort, through pleasure, through what's the most convenient. And it mimics like even the brain, it like shows like through scans, it mimics like levels of pleasure and joy, or pleasure and positivity. But I will always challenge, because it's like, then why are we so dependent, and why are we so aggravated without it? Because a true level of joy and positivity is independent regardless of your circumstances. Like, you can find a way to tap into it. But it wouldn't bring those two strong polarizing experiences or emotions. And even Eunice, like, she practices like what we share here. Like, she's gone off of, like, she's done more social media detoxes. I don't even want to say it, call it social media detoxes, because you've personalized your own too, Eunice. And so I kind of wanted you to even like jump in if you wanted to in this conversation about what is true like your own true joy without it, or how do you even decide on that?
That's so weird because I'm telling Joy, like, I'm only installing my Facebook account if I need to do a live of my daughter. Then once I've done a live, I'm uninstalling it, and then I'll do like repeat the process every single time. So, so you
Yeah.
can imagine like the time that it will take for me to install like the product. I just really, I just want. I'm just using the platform so that I can save like the memories of me and my daughter like doing those things. But after that, like after since I'm not no longer scrolling, so I'm uninstalling Facebook, Instagram. So I'm just doing it for research. Like, I'm doing it
Yeah.
looking yeah. Then like once I've done with work and I've done with like what I want, like saving memories, I'm just like really like putting out everything. So I think Ryan Holiday's it's actually Marcus Aurelius, like he said like it's talking about like you having like a hard time waking up and like going out of bed, like the bees are like doing like the pollination, like the ants are like doing like they are doing their job. So why are you not going to do your job as like a person? And just like, and I think I remember you said about like Jason, it's about I forgot the name, like Jason Roberts quote, like talking no, it's Joseph Campbell. If the path before you is clear, you're probably on someone else's. And like having all
Yes.
of these like encompassing everything, like what we're doing, I think what the three of us are like really focusing on is like paving our own path. We know it's like 2023 is like the paving mode, but I think moving forward in 2024, I think we're going to have all the paths clear for us and have it the ball rolling. So, with all of these conversation going, like, what are like your top three lessons that you've learned for 2023? And then, like, for the discussions that we've had like, for this an hour and a half, that you would like
Eunice,
to.
I
with the
love it.
hard hitting questions
You like
every
she threw
time.
you like the curveballs. I love it though. She's like,
Oh
on like
yeah.
any
She's like, no.
sports team. Yeah, she's the goat for sure. On the sports team, it's like, that one that you just underestimate and you're like, oh.
It's like hardcore. It's like, no, I'll signal. Here we go.
I
What is
love
it?
it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love it. No, you're so right. And I'd say, first off, to what you guys have both been talking about, like, I think if anyone is like listening and they're thinking, well, where do I even start to gain direction in my life, if they realize that they don't have the direction at least that they want or that they're looking for? that is a very strong emotion to be realizing if you've been like, neglecting that self-reflection, and you've been maybe living life fast, or you've been living life on autopilot, or you've been living life, to someone else's direction. And maybe that's created still a pretty stable life for yourself, but that's a powerful thing to realize, and you're going to need to go through the motions there. So the first thing I'd say is like, to Joy's point, deleting social media will help you stay off the screens more, because all that does is inflame your brain. And when you're able to get rid of that, if you're able to, drop back into your space of solitary stillness, right? Screenless, then you've arrived at step one. Like, you've arrived at the ability to go inward and just start reflecting in whatever way makes you like feel more centered. That could be writing, that could be just breathing. But in any case, it needs to be like removing the noise. And that's like something I'll just continue to implement and hammer, like in my life heading into next year. The other would be, and like, I love that you brought up the Joseph Campbell quote, Eunice, because it's like I keep going
So
back to
good.
that. Yeah, and that's on direction, right? If that's something where you're wondering about what that is for you, ask yourself that question. Like, is your path clear right now, or
Mhm.
uh, you know, is it full of right mystery? And I think it's good to have a clear vision, but a clear path might mean a little bit too straightforward of a trajectory. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, maybe you're extremely comfortable with the path you're on right now. It's providing a great lifestyle for you, and like, you're finding happiness through it. And if that's the case, then great. Continue doing your thing. But I would bet that there are a lot of people out there who are still not, like, feeling fulfilled. And so then I would have you ask, you know, are you on someone else's path? And then that's step two, is like, okay, well, I need to figure out like what I really care about. And that would lead into step three. And I know I might be answering this in a funny way, Eunice, in terms of takeaways, but like, this is what I've kind of been thinking about right lately. And I care a lot about. So then step three, or takeaway three, is like, all right, brainstorm the communities you really care about, the causes, the people, right? It could be something as simple, not easy, simple yet difficult, as like maintaining or fostering or rebuilding like an amazing relationship with your loved ones, your partner, your family, your kids, your friend, like whatever it is, but like, you need to figure out what you really care about, and you can write about it. Oh, for me, that was something I did, like, and I, one of my threads, I talked about, like, I wrote a list of communities I cared about, and the running community was one. And I thought, well, how could I better the running community? And for a little bit, it didn't click. Right at first, I was like, well, I don't want to just be one of those people who hires someone to like run with a GoPro while they're running. And I'm just like, that's not how I wanted to operate. I wanted to keep running to just me being able to do that, because it's like euphoric and it's therapeutic for me. And I think introducing noise in that way would be not in alignment with my values. But like, once I discovered, like, and I kept revisiting that question, well, how can I better this community? And I really started addressing that after, my injury and being out of running, right? That's when I really was able to start tapping into that. And I realized that there was an issue then. I pinpointed it, and then I started to gain direction, and momentum just gained from there. But it all starts with, identifying what you care about, and then thinking about how you want to like improve or fix those causes. And those are kind of the three things that I would say people just need to start exploring and asking themselves more. My final one last like quote I have to throw out is from Lauren Fleshman. So she is a ex pro track athlete. She ran for Nike. She actually started out like NCAA champion at Stanford, and then was multiple Olympic trials, and actually at one point was one spot away from qualifying for representing the U.S. in the women's 5K at London. And she talked a lot about how her emotions were like all over the place after not getting that, and a lot of it was due to an injury that she had to speed her recovery path on, and like so many obstacles, right? And then having to go through a lot with her work with Nike, but she said the more I spent time like writing about my experiences off the track and healing off the track through other outlets, the more I found myself when I was back on the track. And I was like, man, like that's exactly what I want to try and harness, like with exploring this outlet, and put all the love that I've developed for running to continue with that example, like pouring that energy out into the world as a love letter to runners. Even though I can't be running right now, I can still improve that community. And so that's how I finally gained like the most clarity I've ever had in my life, despite actually having less on the surface than what I've ever had, as far as like all the like surface check boxes that people talk about with money and like status and all that. So that would be kind of my final thoughts to address like what you guys have been talking about, but would love to hear your guys' thoughts too.
Oh, Isaac, I think you just like summarize such a like great flexibility of allowing someone to just tap into be like, you know what, I forgot of my community. So I love that you just like gave a process, not a step by step, but a process of where to begin. You've obviously helped us so much because we're going to use this in our own things of like, what more community and causes are we going to dive into? But I think just like as we wrap up soon, I think that we just wanted to both like honor you of just your level of, just who you are here with us, but also just in your own personal life of just taking the time and your own level of like, you have your own level of, like you have a conviction to what matters to you. And not only do you have a conviction of it, you're very clear on what is your conviction, but then there's a practicality of like, this is who I am becoming, and this is who I am now. So it's not just we're just talking about things that we learn, we know as self-growth, but like how we live a self-growth life. And it's very significant that because there's always a purpose with every single one in your umbrella with for who you are. And so we just wanted to just like thank you for that, but we also want you to answer one of our questions, our last question, because at Sold Out we really believe like it's really about shattering your limits as you make your dreams real. So if you wanted to just address like what is your definition of like shattering your limits, you're more than welcome right now.
Sure. Well, and likewise, like, thank you so much for like enabling me with this platform, Joy and Eunice, and like you guys clearly are so committed to this, and like I can't wait to see where it takes off. But this is the kind of like action that I like when people take it, it just leads to so many cool things. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. And I'd say to cap off and like to address your question, Joy, like I actually have thought about this a little bit, and I come back to The Alchemist. Actually, have you guys read that book? Oh man, I think I might have just lost your guys' audio. Oh, you're muted.
Yes, yes, but
We both have.
So I threw it back on you guys. But yes, like I go back to The Alchemist, and like that book was one of the first books I read that I loved. It was the first fiction book that I read that I loved. And one of the big principles from it is like we start out young with our hearts like full of imagination and like wonderment and creativity, right? And then this is paraphrasing it, but over time, like we lose that because like we start to get distracted, right? And there's so many different parts of life that we can label as distractions. I even include things that, you know, are important, like, you know, providing for yourself and like making a living and things like that, right? But objectively speaking, while those might be important and even necessary, like those are also distractions to like your own creativity and imagination, like what your power is. And so then your heart starts to quiet. In the word, this is more in the words of the book, right? It's like your heart starts to stop trying to talk to you because it doesn't want to keep being ignored. And so somewhere along the way, we lose sight of like what we are actually supposed to be doing, like, and what our path looks like outside of like our day-to-day lives, right? Where we're just fending for ourselves and chasing check boxes, you know. And I'm not even trying to say that in a completely negative connotation, like, right? But as you brought up earlier, Joy, it's like, you know, stability, comfort, pleasure, those are all things that are great, like, but in moderation, you know, because if you start to become reliant on those things, or you're angry when, you know, external events interfere with those, like, then that's a dangerous vulnerability to have, because then you hit your head at your core and you realize like that you didn't even have your own path. So I'd say, like, you know, shattering your dreams means like tapping back into your own heart and like what you've been trying to, like, you know, regain your energy in ever since you know you started losing it right when you grew up. And the more you're able to tap back into that and start to gain clarity on your direction, once you can get that, then it's just a matter of steamrolling ahead with action. You know, then it's just a matter of like putting your nose to the grindstone and falling in love with the process and all those great little cliches that people talk about. But, you know, to try and like morph back out of cliche, you know, that quote about becoming the best in the world and something and adjusting that statement until it becomes true. Like, you have to believe that you can do that. People might listen to this and they'll write it off. If you take that statement seriously and you realize that most people actually really do sell themselves so short that they never think they could do that, that's what a lot of people do. But if you're able to realize that you can become the best in the world at least one thing, as niche as it might be, you know, as small as that corner of the pie might be from the view above, like you'll still make a ripple effect that's bigger than you could ever think of. And I think that's, you know, that's my goal. And right, trying to double down on like expressing like my truth, finding my tribe, right? Plenty of people won't be in on it. There are a lot of people who probably don't care about, right, having like naturally made running apparel. They just don't care. They just want a cheap pair of shorts to go on their run. And that is completely fine. That's the market. You know, that's the world. But I believe that there are people out there who care about this the way I do. And it reflects kind of that ode to the craft, the ode to the sport that we love. And so then that's just one aspect of my life where it applies because it's one I care about a lot. But, you know, you could apply that to, like I said earlier, like, you know, mastering your home life, mastering, right, your relationship, whatever it is. I think that's, you know, my definition of shattering that is, first you need the direction, you need the dream, you need to identify it, and then you just got to amplify it and put your nose to the grindstone and let the rest carry through.
Thank you so much for explaining how thorough it is. I just like appreciate your level of just like, did you lose out? Yeah, but I was just saying, I'm so appreciative of you just like sharing your did you lose your audio?
You can't hear us.
Wait.
Good thing this is all going to be edited. Can you hear us? Poor thing.
I hate tech.
This is hilarious. Oh, okay. How about okay? Did your headphones?
Let me see if I can hear you now. Okay, I took my headphones out and I can hear you now. For some reason, Joy, when you started responding to me, lost all of it.
You know what? I'm so glad it happened at the very end because we're gonna edit all this part stuff. Anyways.
Okay.
Don't even worry about it. I can just whatever is because I can hear you well. What do you think, Eunice? This part from Isaac's voice.
I can hear you well too. Whichever.
My voice tends to carry, so that this is the type of situation where that helps.
Yeah, your extrovertedness has up the notch, and it's we'll just overemphasize.
Yep.
Oh, so I was saying, I'm very appreciative of just how thorough you explained what you believe is to shatter, your own limits. But it really is just the step before is that you lost your connection from the heart. And that it's at any time you can come back to just that stillness to connect, and that when you do, to honor that, and to just continue following those nudges. You've done that. It shows through the evolution of your story of you connected this one dot, which is what am I passionate about? And then you kept going, and it's evolved. And that's the whole point of that relaxed trust is it's going to evolve. It's not going to always exactly be what you've written on paper or what you see in your mind exactly, but the relaxed trust of it's going to evolve, and it's bringing in more people is what helps it even evolve and advance it or enhance it to serve more people. So we're just so appreciative that you've come on here, and we are definitely going to look forward to seeing you in 2024 to support you even further, or to updated mindset stuff. I think we should just consider you as one of our stoic mentality adapters in life. I don't know what the title would be, but
Good brainstorm the label, but
yeah,
I'd be honored.
Yeah. But yeah, we just wanted to just again, lastly, just be super appreciative that you're here. How can people connect with you, either through all forms of social media, even professionally on LinkedIn? And we would love to know, so we can share it with others.
Yes, of course. So, and in 2024, I plan on possibly adding in writing through the LinkedIn platform.
Okay,
Up
good.
until this point, that has not been the case, but I'll probably add that in. So, last name Feil, F as in Frank, E-I-L. So Isaac is I-S-A-A-C, and then that's where you can find me on LinkedIn. And then for on Twitter or X, I'm writing threads on Isaac JHF notes. And then on Instagram, I'm posting a lot of those threads, and that would be under the IsaacJHF.notes.
Okay, good.
So just keeping it simple. And then, on those pages, you'll find a card website, which is just my personal landing page, and it has links to the newsletters, as well as the social media profiles.
Awesome. Yay. We'll definitely get you all situated, with this podcast with all your links as well. Because we want to support you. And maybe even, in the future, just help you support you with any pre-launches or things like that, to help spread, your huge mission.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you for everything, Joy and Eunice. It's been awesome chatting it up with you guys.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thanks, Isaac.